Welcome back to Senate Education, Thursday, April 14th. Mr. Hall, it's true, we don't always have the opportunity to have you in committee. This is a workforce development bill, H 703. And the chair, Senator Sorokin, said there is an awful lot of overlap, at least some overlap with this committee. And he asked us, and I believe he's also asking Health and Welfare to take looks at different sections. So what I'm wondering if you might do today is first give us broadly overview quickly, if you don't mind, just saying, hey, yeah, there's a ton of ed stuff here. We've got a ways to go, and it's gonna take a couple of hours over the next couple of days, or is it just sort of give us hey, no, this isn't too complicated, and I think we could actually hammer this out at least through the overview by 3:50 today. Just gonna give us give us a sense of what we're looking at.
Yeah, okay. Well, David Hall, Legislative Council, nice to be with you all. I have to level with you, what's in your jurisdiction or not is entirely up to you. Let me tell you the history of this bill, and I mean.
Well, I know there's a lot of CTE language.
There is.
And that is in particular what we would be
Okay.
interested in. But
Yeah.
why don't you give us a little bit of.
Well, so this is a 68-page bill that spends dozens of millions of dollars, all ostensibly related to workforce in one capacity or another. I have to tell you, I think this is the bill on which it is, at least in my tenure, which is coming on 15 years, has now involved the most attorneys of any and I've ever worked on. And that I always end up with these, not necessarily Christmas tree fun bills, but they are these huge amalgamations of different subject matters. And I think no fewer than 6 people in my office wrote parts of this. So in that sense, on the House side, the way this bill worked, and even more so than in the past, is that individual House committees did the work on their sections and their subject matters and basically gave it to Commerce, which took a very light to no touch on changes. So there's a lot going on, and I can help you understand the general sense of most of it, but depending on where you want to drill down, you might need other people in the chair, but I think it's mostly me. And if your focus is on CTE type stuff, we can definitely look at that in more detail. But yeah, it is not a lot of, or any maybe, education policy so much as money and funding for what are usually, for the most part, pilot projects or loan forgiveness in different areas of Vermont: healthcare, education, incarcerated persons, higher ed, lower ed, secondary, post-secondary, CTE, where the crux of it is try to, develop, support more education, more workforce. So we could breeze through.
And I think it is accurate to say there's nothing in here for teacher education workforce. That I believe we've already established. And we are looking at other things for that, but the House did not send us anything on the workforce development bill.
That's right. There's nothing specific to teachers in this bill. So, section 1, you see that first one, A1, this is the flavor of things. This is like keep students in the state by giving them grants to stick around and commit to working. But then it switches to $387,000, a very specific number to VTC for a skilled meat cutter program. So as you guys know how this works, some of this is general. We're going to deal with it by giving VSAC money and authority, and they're going to figure out the parameters. And then we get down to a detail level, like let's give the dollar that VTC needs to make sure skilled meat cutter happens. So that's the kind of thing that is in here. The first real CTE piece is section 2, but that's just findings. And I think you can actually skip to section 3, which is on my page 4.
Well, let's hold on for 1 second,
okay,
if you don't mind. So let's just do a quick look at section 1, because I do believe there are indeed things here. And we have the chair of Health and Welfare. I believe she's also taking up some of this bill in her committee. And again, Senator Sorokin is similar to the House, leaning on other chairs to just have looks at different things.
Sure.
So just tell us a little bit about what this section 1, part 1 is doing as it relates to trying to keep more college graduates in Vermont?
Yeah, well, the paragraph is really the extent of it.
Okay. But $2,500,000 to the University of Vermont Office of Engagement?
In consultation with VSAC.
Right.
That's a lot of kids with.
I can't give you a good sense of the politics that underlie why UVM Office of Engagement. There was a discussion about whether that's a good idea. If this is not just UVM students, this is any students, from graduating from Vermont colleges. So why are they the right people to administer this with consultation of VSAC? I don't know. That's a policy choice the House made, but more or less they're just handing them this block of money and saying, design a program where you're going to have a forgivable loan, $5,000 per graduate for a graduate who commits to work in Vermont for 2 years after they graduate.
So if I've got a Castleton kid,
Yep.
just graduated,
Mhm.
we want to keep him or her in, they're going to get these dollars.
Yep.
So, but they're coming through the University of Vermont Office of Engagement
Mhm.
in VSAC.
That would be the entity that operates nominally as the lead on operating the program.
And generally they carried that role in the past, where you're not.
This
sure?
is all brand
This
new.
is all new. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
You would think that we could give each university or school in Vermont a pot of money rather than, like you said, if my kid graduates from Castleton, now we have to sort of contact the UVM to, I don't know, it just doesn't.
Yeah,
make
no,
sense.
there's something, and we'll have
Makes
UVM,
sense to
and
me.
I'm gonna talk to Michael about what he wants us to do, but I just want to go through today and flag some of these things, and
Okay.
that's one of the things, we can ask about, so.
Well, then I'll slow down a touch and take it down one level so you can look a little more detail if you want to. I've mentioned the 387 to VTC. There's
Sure.
no other strings attached.
No, yeah,
It says
and I get that.
do it.
Yeah.
B, this is an FY23 ARPA appropriation of $500,000. And this goes to AHS for grants, which can be administered through performance-based contracts to refugee or new American-focused programs working in Vermont to support increased in-migration or retention of recent arrivals. So there's a lot of places, and this is one of them in the bill, where there were specific organizations identified to administer this or receive these funds and do this work. And ultimately, the House Appropriations Committee chose not to name entities that are not either state recipients or state instrumentalities. And that's why you have generic language like to refugee or new American focused programs. It's because that money has to flow through, or they want it to flow through AHS, and that will be a performance-based contract. They have somebody in mind, but it might not be them in the end, because we don't want sole source contracts in our appropriations.
Same thing we just dealt with.
We're just talking about something like that. Okay, please go ahead.
All right. So unless you want to read the findings, we can skip to. If you're interested, it is sort of helpful background, but in a nutshell, there has been a conversation in this building, and a lot of you have been part of it, over what the funding and governance structure of CTE should be in Vermont, right? Who should be responsible for it? Should it continue to be this system that's kind of divided and
And there's roughly how many CTEs in the
12 or
state?
13?
Are there that many? Okay.
And some of them are attached to high schools, some are not,
Right.
some are freestanding, etc. There's a sense in some parts of the universe that we need a entity or a group or something at the top to harmonize or more fully integrate the system. But so that work was charged to be done pre-COVID in one of the workforce bills. And because of COVID and a few other moving parts with the state colleges, that work ultimately did not happen. Last year, another bill revised that section and said, we really want you to do this, and here's the money, and here's what we want you to do. So this is money now that's going to go 180,000 to JFO they're gonna do a contract for a contractor of some sort to complete the systematic examination of the existing funding structures of CTE in Vermont, how these structures impede or promote the state's educational workforce development goals, examine CTE governance structures in relationship to those funding structures, examine the implications of existing funding and governance for K through 12 and adult ed, examine funding and alignment of early college and dual enrollment, and consider the CTE funding and governance structures in other states in relation to Vermont's unique system of funding education. Finally, 6, identify, prioritize potential new models of CTE funding and governance structures to reduce barriers to enrollment. So that's all secondary level CTE. B is, and I think I maybe left out an important part, what I was saying about the pre-COVID and then the post-COVID update, that was the adult CTE system. So this section is about secondary CTE. Subsection B says, when you're looking at our secondary CTE system, we want you to talk to the people doing the adult secondary, adult post-secondary CTE system work as well. We want you guys to communicate. And then on March 1st of next year, JFO is going to come back to the committees of jurisdiction about work that happened pursuant to A, and ostensibly to B, talking to the other stakeholders. And then D, here's the work product, here's the result of all of this, is that AOE will consider the work performed and the report issued pursuant to C, which is the JFO, and they're going to develop an implementation plan, including recommended steps to design and implement new funding and governance models. So on or before July 1st, the agency will issue this written report to the committees of jurisdiction that describes the results of its work under this subsection and the implementation plan and recommendations for legislative action. So let me say that all back to you in 15 seconds. We have this work happening on the adult CTE side. We want this work to happen on the secondary CTE side. JFO is going to have a contractor do the scoping, come up with a report on what it might look like, and then AOE will ultimately be charged with delivering to you an implementation plan for what the CTE system may look like. All for $180,000.
It's, when I read it, it's not clear what the implementation plan is implementing. Because the report doesn't say, let's examine all these things and look at other funding options, but then there's the implementation plan includes recommended steps. So do they mean they're to implement recommended steps steps that somebody else recommended, or they're recommending steps that somebody else is doing? I find that section.
Sure, I hear you. And so this came originally out of Commerce, went to Ways and Means, it got changed a bit. Their thought was the contractor should do the complete systematic evaluation, governance, what we got now, what are other places doing,
Right.
What works in Vermont, what doesn't, what might work in other places, give us the lay of the land type thing. And based on the report that the contractor does, the AOE will basically look at that and say, all right, we understand the lay of the land, different models that might work. Now it's our turn to come up with how we realize either the proposals or not. I mean, honestly.
There's no proposal. The report doesn't say propose
It-
it.
and they don't, and that's kind of unsaid, you could look, honestly, AOE could look at the report and say, we don't think any of that's gonna work. So our
But they have
implementation,
to do an implementation.
they might have, that, right, well, recommended steps to design and implement new funding and governance models. So there is a disconnect between what the report might say and what AOE eventually determines to be the best path. forward.
Recommended steps could be different.
Yes.
Yes.
Sarah Lyons?
So the money's going to JFO, are they hiring a consultant? Because I haven't been, so there's a consultant involved.
Yeah.
So a consultant ought to be able to make some specific recommendations for different types of governance structures and,
Well, that's what number 6 is on page
Okay.
5. They would identify and prioritize potential new models of
don't they
CTE
have
funding
a-
and governance structures to reduce barriers to enrollment and improve the quality and duration access to CTE. So they are,
They are doing that.
identify and prioritize new models, but they're not going to say, state,
Do this.
do this. They're going to take they're gonna do this review and analysis, and then AOE is gonna be the one that has to say, this is how we,
Are they gonna do
Actually-
the pros and the cons of the different models based on our geography and location of CTEs and all the rest of that?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Let me just
You would
interrupt for
hope
one
so.
moment. Dr. Boucher, thanks for joining us. How much were you involved in, how much was the agency involved in drafting this?
Very much involved, and I've been really
Sure.
wanting to get into the conversation. Counselor Hall has done a really nice job of a high level, but there's a lot of detail and a lot of context that I need to provide for the committee. This is so I think many of you know, some of you certainly do. So I'm going into my 8th year here, and CTE has been something that I've been working on that whole time. So we have done a lot in the CTE space. The last piece standing to actually fix our CTE system is the very sexy topic of funding and governance. And we're right on, that was supposed to make everyone laugh, because it's usually the thing that, is everyone wants to run out of the room. So we've done a lot programmatically with CTE is what I'm saying. This is, I'm very excited about this final piece, and I want to talk more about the details from our perspective of what that needs to look like, because it's really the way to actually do the fiscal modeling to actually show us what one example would look like, which is if we actually changed CTE so it was a census-based model, and it actually, the funds did not follow students. So each, the CTE Center got a census-based chunk of dollars to actually do CTE. That's the bulk on the financial side that this study would actually be running the numbers on to look at what that would look like. So we have some, if I can, is it time for me to kind of take the floor and talk about the specific language that we have concerns with, or should I hold on that?
Mr. Hall, does that work for you? Do you think the secretary can give some additional clarity? I mean, you're not you're sticking around.
Yeah, no, I think with every single one of these sections, there's words on the page, and then there's about a mountain of things beneath them. So to the extent you want to contextualize any of this with the agency and other sections with Department of Labor, it's going to be critical.
All right, so go ahead, Dr. Boucher. I'm sorry, Senator Lyons.
I just want to ask David a quick question, and that is, do you have a section by section summary of this bill?
I think we do.
Can we get copies of that?
If you just email it to Daphne. that would be
Yeah.
great.
Okay,
And
sorry.
again, committee, from what I'm hearing, this is just, we're just getting an understanding of what Senator Sorokin's committee is sort of dealing with. I think we are going to sort of divide and conquer, but we also know, I'm hoping this committee wraps up pretty close to next Friday with our work. So, unless we're here until the 12th. So we'll see, I guess, what we can get done. I'm sure you're going to be dealing with it as well.
Oh, we are.
Yeah.
Possibly beginning tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe David Hall will be available.
You'll want Jen to help you with your cases. Trust me.
Jen.
So committee, what's your preference as Mr. Hall is looking for this? Do you want to continue with Mr. Hall? Just continue walking through and then go to Dr. Boucher? What would people like to do?
Why don't we hear, since she's here?
Yeah,
What other sections?
so she might not have been.
Yeah, she might.
Oh, there are sections. There are a bunch
Well, I
of
know,
other
we
sections
need to-
related to CTEs and
Everything.
early childhood, which
Okay.
is, I think, mostly you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is great.
no,
But what other sections would pertain to us that maybe Mr. Hall needs to be here?
Sure, I'm looking at section 13, secondary school industry, recognized credential pilot program, work-based training. I mean, I have a bunch of sections that I think Mr. Hall will have to go through. But we can have them back in tomorrow.
okay.
So I do need to,
We have you to
Right.
350, right?
yeah, so at some point I'm gonna have to bounce to right in a minute that needs to be voted out of House General for a housing bill. But I can do whatever you need me to do until I need to go.
What's that?
If it is limited time, maybe we should stick it.
What do people want to do? I think honestly, if as long as we can get you back tomorrow, let's go back and forth.
Sure.
Dr. Boucher, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So the $180,000 is the Agency of Education's estimate of what this next step would be, following directly from the pilot study that was commissioned and enacted in legislation in 2019, I believe, and then the study was completed in 2021. That work actually identified the notion of, the funding model that I just talked about. And one of the limitations of that particular study is that it was a pilot project for all kinds of our current CTE governance to actually kind of relax some of the regulations to the extent that we could, that were not statutory, and allow them to kind of get in the sandbox and figure out what funding changes and what governance changes would work for them. Unfortunately, we only heard back after multiple calls from the independent CTE centers. So these are the centers that actually are their own school districts. So part of the reason we need to do this next step is that we need to actually look and make sure that the funding model that's been identified with this pilot would also work for the not private, excuse me, but the independent CTE centers would also work for instance, the comprehensive CTE centers where they're actually housed at an actual high school and the sending districts as well. So anytime we're going to talk about changing funding, we have to look at some of these kinds of fallouts. And I think this is an area that this committee knows very well that I think Commerce might not quite have the dexterity with, because we know that we have a lot of small high schools. And so if we're messing around with some of the funding and the bodies that are going to be in those high schools, there's going to be some implications there. So we estimated $180,000 to actually finish this piece about the funding and actually run the modeling to actually then come back to the legislature and say, yes, here is the implementation plan if we're going to go with this this approach. In terms of governance, we do still need to do a little bit of work, which would also be encapsulated by the same contractor, to actually look at some options. So one option, which is different than one school district for the state, I just want to say that, but one option that I have heard personally from a lot of CTE directors that they're interested in is having one CTE district at a governance level, and then still have obviously CTE being provided throughout the state. The recommendation from this pilot study was that all CTE centers would become independent districts. I think that we need to think carefully about that. We have both our most expensive CTE center that is an independent district, and we have both our least expensive center that is an independent district. So again, this $180,000 is really to look at with a fine-tooth comb what that would actually look like in the state. So what I would say is that we have some concerns with this latest version. It doesn't look exactly like what we worked on with House Education. I would say the scope has increased, so yet the funding has remained the same. So the part about examining the funding of early college and dual enrollment, I mean, that's a whole study in and of itself. So it's unclear how that would fit in here. Considering the CTE and other states, we actually, the agency has the expertise in this area. This is our work. We don't need to know, we already know what's going on in other states. And so that would be redundant work to be done. Identifying and prioritizing the potential new models is fine with us. That's what we think the bulk of this is about. I just have one more point, and then if anyone has questions for me, this will be the piece I wanted to say, which is we're actually not entirely sure. This was originally proposed to go directly to the agency. With $180,000, we would certainly be able to do a streamlined bidding process. We actually already have the entity, excuse me, that worked on the first component of this. We would still follow procurement, but it would be streamlined with $180,000. And so it's unclear to us why we would now put JFO in the middle of this work, because that would actually probably put more sort of like bureaucratic organization into this process, and we're unclear about where that came from. We don't have any problem with the JFO per se, of course, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense to us in terms of A, the urgency of this need, and then B, the streamlined nature of the work that we can actually do. Like we know how to do this. We did the first part. We're just asking to actually finish out this work. So that's what I have in a nutshell. That was fast.
Dr. Boucher, you might be able to help us with this. So it sounds as though a bunch of committees in the House did their own work. They brought it all together, and that is really what we're looking at. So what would be helpful to us, I think, is to know, if you happen to know this, and I realize it's not your job to know this, who drafted this for the House?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, that was Kath James, and
what lawyer drafted it?
Probably Jim. I don't know.
Okay,
that
so
one.
I see what you're saying now. All these
Yeah.
different attorneys drafted different sections,
Yeah.
put a staple on it, and sent it to the House floor effect.
I think that Jim originally started with this.
Okay.
Beth may have picked up part of it. I wrote the language that Ways and Means told me to write,
Sure,
and here we are.
please, for sure.
Dr. Boucher, my prime question I had for AOE is the language on the top of page 6, the as-passed version, that's asking AOE to do this implementation plan and include in that the steps. Are you okay with that language? Was that language changed, or is that the language you want?
We're not okay with it if the JFO is running the contract and then we're given something to kind of do with a 4-month timeline during the session. That doesn't really work for us. So I hope that makes sense why that's really tough. I mean, I guess if the General Assembly thinks there are benefits to the JFO maybe running the contract, and if that's something that's really set in stone, then I guess we would strongly urge that it's in partnership with AOE so that we can be part of the work. They're going to ask us to do work on the contract anyway, JFO would. So, I actually, in my mind, think that we would be close to having an implementation plan as a result of this $180,000 work if we keep it to those 2 pieces that I talked about. So the scope has expanded, and what I'm actually suggesting is we put it back, if that you consider putting it back to what we actually proposed, which is just those first couple of bullets.
So you're answering a question that I'm going to ask. I think you're already answering it, but if you had the $180,000, or how much would you need? Would you be doing the study yourself and collecting the data? No, you'd still have a consultant working with you. And yeah, but I'm also hearing that if the consultant were hired by JFO, that with the understanding that you would work collaboratively with the consultant, that could happen. Trying to sort out what's the best way to go with a consultant. First of all, yeah.
I'm not sure what that would buy us in terms of time, but
yeah,
we,
exactly.
because we already, we ran the first part as a grant to the field. It ended up, we had to report on that. And so it ended up that what we're asking now is, okay, we got some preliminary findings, as you would with a pilot project. And now we're asking for a bit more to just actually finish the analytics that were started and expand them for the fuller system, in addition to digging a little deeper in terms of our governance structure.
But what you're saying now is that you would be doing that, the agency would be doing that, or the consultant
No,
would be.
we would be doing it because we would certainly hope that the contractor that started this work as part of the pilot project with 3 of the CTE centers would be highly interested in doing this work again. And that's actually where the 180,000 figure came from. So
Got it.
we would still be contracting it, but there's a path there.
Got it. Okay,
Does that
thank you.
help? Does that
Yeah,
help?
very much.
So
Very,
Dr. Boucher, if we're editing this bill right now and Michael Sorokin Senator Sorokin needed us to just give him sort of the bare bones message, you're saying to keep sections 1 and 2. You have it right in front of you?
I do.
Get rid of sections 3.
Keep 3. Keep 3.
3.
Keep 3
Get rid
is
of
fine.
4.
Yep.
Get rid of 4.
Get rid of
Get rid of-
5.
Get rid of 5. Keep 6.
6 is fine. I think 6 is repetitive of what we're doing, so that's okay. Yep.
All of 6, section 6B and 6C as well.
Yeah, 6B is fine. That's actually about
Okay.
us, this contractor actually making sure they just pay attention to what's happening on the adult CTE contractor side when I look at that.
Mhm. And then that brings us to D.
C is a little weird.
C, I know, C is, I have a note, I think you just referenced it. Why is C here? For joint fiscal office to do this work.
Yeah, because it was referred to
Who was that
before.
in?
It was in 8.
That was added in Ways and Means.
They just love this.
But right now, you're okay with 6, B, C, and D?
We would change 6B to us, the AOE, instead of fiscal
Okay.
office, because we would, what we're proposing is that we would actually have the allocation to AOE.
Yeah, so I don't see fiscal office in B, so you mean 6C?
Yes,
Is that
I'm
accurate?
sorry if I misspoke. 6C,
No,
yes.
that's fine.
They would also change it here at the beginning.
In 8.
A.
Yes, yes.
And we worked with both Charlie
Oh.
and Kimball and on those deadlines, again, with the limited scope and with us doing the contracting.
Okay,
I just think it would be kind of weird if, it just seems kind of odd that another entity would do the contract and would be sort of like doing that work, and then we would just be given kind of a done deal and say, implement this. It just seems a little strange to us. It's not the usual way we do work. Particularly
This is
when we have the expertise on CTE.
yeah,
I don't know how the JFO feels about that. I don't even know if they want this. I haven't heard.
this is helpful. Very helpful to give us this overview and what you would actually end up liking or keeping and removing. Mr. Hall, do you have anything to add? I'm not saying the committee's making decisions right now, but this is giving us an idea of where things started and where things wrapped up and how they got there. Mr. Hall, I guess the question, you drafted this were you in Ways and Means or was that someone else?
No, again, I drafted a couple of changes for Ways and Means that they requested, so.
Do you remember whether or not you drafted the section that has this going to joint fiscal?
Yes, that's part of the Ways and Means amendment.
And so why did they want joint fiscal over agency of education?
I have no idea.
Okay, okay. So this is helpful. I mean, it gives us a little bit of an overview. I keep saying it to kind of convince myself that it's helpful. This is a good day.
Speak for yourself.
Right. I think I'm trying to find the best path forward with a complex bill, and I really think it is, Mr. Hall, for you to ask your colleagues who drafted the education sections And that person should really come in and have a conversation with us.
Yeah, I
Does
hear
that make
you.
sense? I mean, otherwise, we're gonna be guessing and wondering.
Well,
who's doing-
that's fine, and I did email you the section by section summary.
Great,
And
Goody.
what I can do is send either a modified summary or a separate document that says who the primary attorney is on each of the sections.
we just
I will
need to know
say-
if it's Jim Demaray or Elizabeth.
Yeah,
St. John.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It's lots of different people.
Jim's on the screen now.
Yeah,
I'm good. It's not typical. I'm, at least me, I don't know how you work with the other attorneys, but I'm generally pretty hesitant to say the whys and wherefores, or
sure,
even,
that makes, sure.
you know, that's not really something I can, I don't want to impute intent to a house committee or a member. So I can tell you what the words say, what legal implications are and all that, but the political questions of why this might be the right idea or why they were motivated to do something or other. If I heard public testimony on it, I'm happy to share public testimony on it. I got to tell you, there's not enough of me to go around to sit through all of the testimony on this bill, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
No, and I'll be honest, I mean, down the hall, economic development's really concerned that this has arrived here and there's a lot of work to do, and how is everybody gonna get all this done?
It's super late and
Yeah.
it's very decentralized and, you know.
I just want us to do our job, so if you
Sure.
wouldn't mind just
Absolutely.
asking our or sending that and just
Yeah,
letting us know.
I
who
think
did
it would be
section.
most helpful if I just add another column to that summary. And
Okay.
it says primary attorney.
Great,
That way you would be
Great.
able to just
great,
key in on that.
makes sense?
Yeah. Do we actually have the bill?
We don't have the bill. It's in it's in Senator Sorokin's committee. But he did ask that, we, and I think he's gonna ask other committees to go through the educate, the various sections, but, I mean,
You
Unless
get it
we're
all
here.
day. Karen.
Well, it's a lot of good stuff, but I mean.
there's a lot of good stuff, and
We
we
get
don't
a,
wanna
we get a
lose
week,
it.
we get a
Right.
week before morning committees are gone and
Right,
then,
right.
I mean, we get
So-
3 weeks to adjournment.
And if we end up just having, these few sections, great. I mean, we can do the CTE stuff pretty quickly, and we can do some of the other sections possibly. So we'll wait to see what Mr. Hall shares with Daphne. Daphne, we're gonna have probably whoever drafted the sections of H 7043, we'll have them tomorrow to continue this conversation. The education sections. How's that feel to you? And that gets you a little bit off the hook, rightfully so, if other people.
It might, I don't know. Some of them I did work on, so I'm not.
Would you
sure.
rather just come back and go through the education sections? I'm just trying to find,
Sure. Yeah,
so
let
here's
me
the
identify
question.
them first.
Okay.
And then we can have a conversation about what makes the most sense. I mean, part of them are gonna be me, and I'll
Sure.
definitely be back tomorrow. To the extent you might be able to get some other folks, if you're interested in those pieces, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Chocolate for the road?
No,
Yeah.
thank you.
So you will get back to Daphne
Yep. I'm
around
gonna go do
this.
that now, because their house is still on the floor.
Right, so just to summarize the education sections and who drafted them.
Yep.
Great. Great work.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'm pausing here because
It's okay.
what you might consider to be education sections, I don't know. So I'm just gonna do every section and you can decide whether or not you want to hear more about it.
No, I respect that and I appreciate it, but Jim will know probably what we should see.
Probably.
I'm gonna bet on it. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
To the extent how they're dividing up their portfolio.
Okay,
So
sure.
that's
Or maybe
my
in the same-
education then.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Thank you.
all.
Thanks, Ed.
This is gonna be so,
A lot of healthcare stuff in there.
I know.
Yeah.
We're working on that.
Great.
There's too much,
Yeah,
and we don't have any time.
I know that's the issue, is time.
But having the section by section.
You sure you want to do this tomorrow, Ginny?
Don't you worry.
Okay, Dr. Boucher, thank you. We're gonna, Daphne's gonna reach out to you tomorrow also when we do additional education sections. So we will find some more time to make our way through this, and I'll talk to Senator Sorokin and leadership about timeline on this. So
That sounds great. I believe most of the other education is higher education though, and VSAC,
Right, and
just so
that's
you
us.
know.
Great, okay, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Mr. Fisher, great to see you. Thanks for your help with everything. We'll see that new draft tomorrow on that different bill, H716. When you leave, would you let the next witnesses in?
Absolutely.
Great, not that you have to leave right now, but
Why are you here? Wasn't that the question for Ted?
are they here?
They're in the other room.
They're in the-
Okay, guys.
Thank
I
you.
will go grab them.
Ted, will you check that renewable heating?
Yes, Jill's already on that, so we'll be in touch. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Ted.
Would you fault the structure of this bill and that it has too many topics and it should have been split into different bills?
I would have rather just seen one bill come to us, education committee on this stuff, one go to healthcare.
Yeah,
Why did they do that? Why did they
I'm
do
not
that?
sure why they did it as their one big workforce development bill. I
this
don't
would
know.
be a good discussion when we're off the air.
And I think partly, yeah, might have been the timing.
I have a Zoom meeting at 4:45.
Oh, yeah, we should. Okay, who's gonna take that? You can take that chair. Oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, she gave it to.
Oh, you took it. You're fine. You're fine.
You can't make fun of me at 10
No, you're totally fine.
It's just the
No,
chair.
Wendy, you're fine.
Right. It's the
And the
other guy.
bathroom.
So you guys live near pharmacy? You'll be fine. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. It's the Senate Education.
You've had your boost.
Don't
Yeah,
have.
yeah. First of all, it's great to see both of you.
Thank you.
H517 is a bill, of course, that we would love to get close to finishing the next couple of days, if not today, and have an opportunity to vote on it next week and send it out. Thank you. I am passing out committee members copies of the bill. Do either of you need a copy?
You can
We
share.
have an extra copy. Okay, there you are. That's just another-
Yeah, this is the one we saw. Yeah, we saw last night.
Okay, so we'll start with Mr. Demaray.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are walking through draft 2.1 of your amendment to H517. In section 1 on line 8, we've got new language in yellow. So this is existing language and statute that's being changed. So it's really going to the point about the tuition benefit. And line 15 now says for courses at any Vermont State College institution or UVM, the benefit shall be the in-state residence tuition rate for the relevant institution. So that now picks up Castleton College as well. On page 2, line 1, for courses at any eligible Vermont private post-secondary institution, the benefit shall be the in-state tuition rate charged by UVM. So that's really changing the rate from MDU to UVM. As I say, Castleton College got moved into the first subdivision, so they can charge what they charge. And then 3, for courses at an eligible training institution offering non-degree certificate training or continuing education programs, the benefit shall be, the lower of the institution's standard tuition or the in-state tuition rate charged by UVM.
Yes, Senator Persley.
Maybe one of our witnesses would know this. Are there any Vermont private post-secondary institutions that charge less than UVM's in-state tuition rate?
I do not believe so.
Because we wouldn't want to give them more than they would charge otherwise, but I assume they would all charge more.
I think they all charge more.
So Sterling charges more.
Sterling's current tuition is at $45,000 a year.
Okay.
UVM's in-state tuition is $18,600.
Okay. I think Sterling just jumps out as that
Yeah.
small school up in Craftsbury that I thought might be.
And the only reason I know that is if I'm on their board. of
You're on board,
trustees.
that's why I asked it, yeah, okay. That's a good question. Please, go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry, go ahead. Senator.
So one other question for Jim. Will we need to amend the statute after the change of Vermont State College? No?
I would think to reflect the new name. I'm not sure when that's gonna happen. Yeah.
That is the new name?
Please.
So the corporate entity is Vermont State Colleges system.
Okay.
And so because you're tying it to Vermont State Colleges, it will not matter which institution within the system, either this coming year or after the 3 unified Vermont State University. So this language encompasses.
So
corporate
that
businesses.
that kind of corporate entity remains, even though it's going to be called Vermont University.
Well, because the single entity is the Vermont State Colleges, and currently it's the 4, and once the unification happens, it'll be the 2, Vermont State and CCB. So that covers CCB in the future as well.
Thank you.
Jim?
We are on page 3. So page 3, line 19 is new statutory language that allows more than one certificate under the program. And the clarification here is on page 4. The rate would be at UVM's in-state tuition rate. So that's on line 1 of page 4. And then after that, we turn to next change is over on page 6. So section 5 and section 6 are identical sections. One applies to UVM, the other to VSC. And on line 10, we changed the language here to deal with what happens if a spouse or dependent child moves out of state. So on line 14, it says the spouse or dependent child shall not lose classification as an in-state student if the spouse or dependent child continues to reside in the state and the member of the U.S. Armed Forces is transferred on military orders or retires. So, for example, there, if the spouse attends Castleton and the spouse, the member is transferred to Germany, the spouse has to stay in Vermont to get the in-state benefit. Can't move to New York. And then 17 says the spouse or dependent child shall lose this classification as an in-state student under this subsection if the spouse or dependent child no longer resides in the state and shall regain this classification upon again taking up a residency in the state only if the member of the U.S. Armed Forces is stationed in this state pursuant to military orders. That stops them from moving out to California for 10 years and coming back in and claiming this benefit.
So if a husband goes out, the wife is still here, she's not getting anything.
If the husband
is in California and the wife is here, she is. Okay.
She's fine. Yeah.
She's fine. Okay. And the kids. Okay.
But if they move across,
If they move where?
across the border, New Hampshire, New York,
They can't lose it.
I see.
And then move back. Like
But
they were in the state
Yeah.
as a child,
Right.
and then their parent gets transferred to a different base in another state. And then they move to New Hampshire for 2
Right.
years. They can't come back and say, oh, remember, I used to
Right.
get this. Now that I'm in
I
college.
got my residency
Yeah.
2
But
years
if they-
ago.
Yeah.
now.
Or 10 years.
Right.
Senator Hooker?
case where somebody moves across the border, maybe, the member is transferred to Germany, the spouse moves back with her family, his family,
Too bad.
and then comes back and the spouse is then assigned to the state. They gain that residency status again?
Yeah, because it,
Yeah.
it
Trying to
says
go back.
Okay,
if the member of the U.S. Armed
Begin all
Forces is
over.
stationed back in the state pursuant to military orders.
okay.
That would work.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Go
the
ahead,
same language is on page 7 for the other university. So same language exactly as on page 6. And those were the changes.
Jim, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
We ready to move this out?
Let's do it.
We would need a clean copy. We'll move it out tomorrow. Give everyone an opportunity to have a look, see. Nice.
I was gonna do that tonight, actually.
Yeah. So you have the audio of this one, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
On the way home. Thank you both.
Thank you for spending so much time with us on this.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Of course. Anything else? All right, well, while we do have you here on one issue, just quickly, something to think about. We just started this walkthrough of H703, which is the Workforce Development Bill.
Yeah.
And one question popped out to all of us is that the University of Vermont Office of Engagement is going to be given $2.5 million to do this work. Why? Please.
It's a pass-through,
Okay,
so it's $2.5 million that will go directly out the door to students who are graduating from Vermont institutions to help them stay and take jobs in state.
but why you guys as a pastor? I'm just curious. Would you make money off the interest of it? I mean, I'm just, did you advocate for it?
We would get an administrative fee
Okay,
in order to administer the program like BSAC does,
Sure.
like AHEC does. But we did not advocate for it, we
Okay.
didn't ask for it. It was something that House Commerce had put in
and you're okay with
as
it?
an idea, and we're fine with
You're
it.
fine with it?
And
Okay.
also, I believe that the language says that we will work with BSAC to set up the program.
Okay,
So they will help guide us in setting it up appropriately,
okay,
and be there to support us as we do it for the first year.
great, yeah.
Would you be okay if BSAC did it in coordination with UVM, the other way around?
Sure, I mean, I think that, I do think that BSAC has been given so much this year in terms of these types of things that I think they were pleased to have us do it. Because in this bill alone, they're asked to do a multitude of administrative duties. So I think that, I don't know this, but I think that they may have suggested that we do it to help take some of the load off of them.
Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
So I think we're in a good spot with this. Hopefully by the end of tomorrow, we'll be in a good spot with H716. And then that leaves 456, which I don't think is going to be too complicated. This is the governance bill that we've already sort of started on. And then the big thing will be H727. And what I'd like to do, we have witnesses coming in at 4:20. Should we get them a little sooner?
Yeah, 2 of them are available now.
All right, let's start at 4:10. We'll go from 4:10 and we'll stop at 4:45. So they'll sit on 7:27.